The City of Annapolis primary election is Tuesday, September 16th. Polls will be open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m., and if you are in line by 8, you will still be able to vote. There is no Republican primary this year, as all Republican candidates are unopposed and will advance to the November general election. On the Democratic side, there are contested races for mayor and in wards 1, 3, 4, and 6. If you received a mail-in ballot, it must be received, not just postmarked by 4:30 p.m. on September 12th. Ballots can be mailed, dropped in an official drop box, delivered to City Hall, or taken to your polling place on Election Day. Ion Annapolis offered every candidate in the challenge race the opportunity to speak with us. We reached out to each campaign 3 times. Each candidate was asked these same questions, and their answers are presented here, unedited and in their own words. No one received the questions in advance, and in fairness, all of these conversations are being released at the same time. We do plan to do something similar for the general election once the ballot is set. Please have a listen to each of these candidates so you can make an informed vote. Well, today we're talking with Coren Makell, who is a Democrat running for Alderwoman in Ward 4. And I want to thank you, number 1, for running, and number 2, for your time today.
Of course. I appreciate the opportunity to not only talk with you, but to share my message with my campaign. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, let's get right into it. We've got a big project going on down at City Dock. It's the City Dock Resiliency and Flooding Project. Do you support that current City Dock plan, and how would you ensure its success if you were elected into Ward 4?
That is a semi-difficult question. I do think that the preservation of City Dock is very much necessary and needed as far as ensuring that we create some type of flood prevention system in order to, again, preserve our historic district of downtown Annapolis. The way everything kind of went about, I'm not totally for, only because I feel like, there could have been a better amount of transparency and, just communication with the residents of the entire city to make sure that, the project is going to align with what our city and our residents see the future for City Dock. Again, I do think that the renovations and the flood prevention is very necessary. I think that the project can be a great asset to the city, not only for its residents, but for the visitors that are consistently downtown. I think that there should have been a stronger focus on community engagement as well as like recreational, not necessarily sports, but activities. Being able to partner with an organization like Capital Sub to be able to provide kayaking and paddleboarding and things of that nature, so that not only the residents but the tourists and visitors are able to, participate and see all of Annapolis and see what all of Annapolis really has to offer.
Fantastic. I want to slide over a little bit to crime and public safety. And several neighborhoods are facing public safety challenges. And I know in 24, Ward 7 was actually ranked as one of the more violent wards for the crime. They had 1 homicide, 2 rapes, and multiple robberies. And officials are noting common issues like thefts from unlocked vehicles citywide, have discussed solutions such as better street lighting and community policing to deter crime. What do you think we need to do to improve public safety here in Annapolis?
I honestly think that crime should be looked at through a prevention lens, and prevention through opportunity is what's really necessary. I think that there has been a lack of programming for not only the youth, but for, residents or community members that are re-entering the society. So I think that, give me 1 second. Sorry, my little cousin ran into the street and I had to run after him so he didn't get hit by a car. Um, um, so you said public safety, crime, Ward 7. In what ways how can we address the crime in public safety? That was what we were talking about, right?
Yep. What do you think we need to do to improve public safety here in Annapolis is the basic question.
Well, I think the misconception of public safety is a lot of people only focus on policing. Public safety has a lot more to do than just police officers, which includes firefighters, OEM, and even the harbor master. So being able to um, really be able to not only provide opportunities to be a part of those type of public safety communities, but getting people to really understand what public safety is and how our city has been able to keep up with the increasing amount of crime. And things of that nature. So, like I said, I think the Annapolis United program that Rhonda Pendell Charles has created is a good starting point for being able to kind of address some of the public safety issues and incorporate a more of a community centric sense when it comes to public safety. Me personally, I would like to relook at the initial plan for Annapolis United and try to incorporate things like internship programs for high school students during the summertime so that they can really understand what public safety really is. And I feel like that, again, being able to bring those public safety initiatives to the communities on a more consistent basis and not when it's just an emergency. So for police officers being able to go into the underserved communities or communities that experience high crime and being able to do like a meet the cop or being able to do like a what's expected at a traffic stop so that people are more aware of the safety hazards that are put into place, the safety risks that are put into place when being a public safety official, like a police officer or firefighter, and being able to educate the community about how we as a community could help our public safety personnel to making sure that we as a community are eliminating as much risk as possible, so that when they do enter into our community, they feel more welcoming and feel more have a better ability to really get the job done and not feel like that it's a battle between protecting somebody's safety or making sure that there isn't a crazy news article being written about them the next day or whatever the case may be. So I think prevention through opportunity is a great starting point, and again, just being able to be more transparent and be more inclusive and engaging when it comes to really just educating the community about what public safety really is.
Fantastic. Um, Housing costs are a growing concern for many in Annapolis. And in fact, actually, there was a survey of Maryland voters recently ranking affordability as their number one concern, even above taxes and crime. And they found that 42% of young renters are considering leaving the state due to the high cost of housing. What are your thoughts to make Annapolis a little bit more affordable?
That's a really good question. And I will say I'm a native Annapolitan, and I've been here my whole life. My mother just moved away and went to Baltimore County maybe about 2.5 years ago, just because, she wanted to buy a house, and even with our incomes together, we couldn't afford to um purchase a house so that we could, stay close to the rest of our family and things of that nature. And so I think that one of the most important things is obviously financial education. Financial literacy is definitely important because a lot of people don't realize that, the average income is around like $19 an hour. That's the kind of like average. So having a better sense of money management can definitely go a long way, but then also being able to provide more economic opportunities around job training and around just being more inclusive when it comes to the development of the city. So the last few months I have been visiting some of the trade unions along with Alderperson Brooke Schandelmeyer in order to build more connections when it comes to the local unions that serve the Annapolis area, the Annapolis and the greater Annapolis area, so that we can put forth legislation that uh, that promotes prevailing wages so that we can then again promote local hiring when it comes to these development projects that are going to be implemented, I'm assuming, in the near future for Annapolis. So being able to not only hire local to create that economic income for our residents, but being able to actually provide them with the job training and the opportunities to not only learn a skills trade, but earn their certificates in those trades so that not only will they be able to work locally, but then they'll be able to then expand into, Anne Arundel County. I think that it's a lot of different avenues that we can take in order to provide economic opportunity. But one of the first ways, obviously, would be financial literacy, money management, and then figuring out ways that actually promote and encourage people to take advantage of these services as well as programming and work.
Very cool. Annapolis's economy relies heavily on tourism and government, which has contributed to a reputation of being difficult to do business here. And some local entrepreneurs have even said, I'm just never spending any money in this town again, out of frustration with the red tape. What are your thoughts to make the city more business friendly while still preserving the charm and character that the tourism base is built on?
That's a great question. And if you don't mind, can you repeat it one more time just so I can make sure I hit all of the talking points? But that was a really good question.
Well, absolutely. Basically, what are your ideas to make the city more business friendly, but keeping in mind that we need to maintain the charm and character because we're so dependent on tourism?
Right. And I think a lot of the tourists and visitors come to Annapolis for the historic aspect of Annapolis. And I believe that being able to preserve a lot of these historic parts of the city is very important. But being able to make our city more business friendly will all entitle with going through this procurement and licensing process. I mean, from what I can understand and from the things that I've been hearing from local business owners and even residents that want to try to start businesses here in Annapolis, it's a really difficult process. So, really being able to have the ability to analyze the current process, but also evolve the current process into making it more user friendly so that you're not waiting weeks and months in order to hear back from from City Hall, which could then, promote more businesses coming to Annapolis, will promote thriving businesses in Annapolis, especially when it comes to, minority businesses.
Right. Um, Transportation and traffic congestion, parking shortages, they're tight, especially during tourist season, as well as certain events. And the public transit options are limited here in the city, and a lot of residents complain about the difficulty getting around. Um, what are your thoughts to improve mobility in the city? And I do want you to address the issues with the garages and the different apps and everything else and see if we can, what are your thoughts on fixing that?
Yeah. So, as far as the garages go, I think the city could have done a better job at uh, regulating and analyzing and regulating the contracts that they have with the parking garage company. I think that the it's it's tech savvy, but it's not user friendly, which it probably sounds complicated, but it's really not. I think the city website in itself is not user friendly. So I really do feel like that, with the evolution of technology, there should be a more efficient way in order to provide information to the city. But as far as parking goes, I think that the parking permitting and the apps that are being used for the garages needs to be more efficient. I think that, it's good that residents here in Annapolis get a total of 2 hours free, but I honestly don't think that that's enough. And as far as transportation as a whole goes for the city, I think the city has done a decent job at being able to provide routes that go throughout the city. But I definitely think that um, it could be done more efficiently. And I've always kind of went back to Ocean City. So they have a shuttle that literally runs day in and day out up and down their main streets in order to provide transportation for residents and for visitors that are there. I think that on the two main streets that we have in Annapolis, Forest Drive and West Street, there should be shuttles that connect to the downtown area. So I know that downtown already has that violet or purple bus that takes them up and down Main Street and all the way up to the circle. I think that can be a central connecting point to majority of Annapolis. I think that will be a good way to being able to incorporate a shuttle system similar to the Magenta. It's the Magenta bus. The Magenta bus, being able to implement a system that's effective like that on West Street and Forest Drive will be very effective when it comes to transportation, especially if those buses and those routes are being continued throughout the later evening, especially on the weekends and in the summertime. I think that, just analyzing certain transportation routes and the way of certain transportations could be very effective when it comes to Annapolis. Just given the fact that Annapolis is so small, I do think that, with not necessarily more case studies, but with taking the time and doing the due diligence and making sure that what we are providing, the services that we're providing to the city is actually going to be efficient and effective.
Fantastic. Well, I think you're probably going to have some opinions on this one, but while city government doesn't control the schools, which are sort of run by the county, the leaders of the city do have an impact on education and youth in Annapolis. How would you support educational opportunities and youth programs for the young people of our city?
So I'm all for it. I think that the elected officials and community leaders in Annapolis should definitely voice their opinions and stand up for the Annapolis residents when it comes to educational purposes. I do understand that, the city doesn't have any jurisdiction or any regulation when it comes to making decisions about education, but Annapolis holds a plenty of schools, for one, and all of our residents go to these schools. So why wouldn't we want to, voice our opinions when we are making decisions about schools, making decisions about students in Annapolis? Um, I have a really close relationship with Joanna Tobin and Lisa Robian. And even though, Lisa Robian is on the county council and doesn't have really anything to do with the public school system, um, she does her best in order to voice her opinion and have meaningful conversations when it comes to decision making around education. I love Joanna. I think Joanna is a great community leader, and she has been very effective when it comes to decision making and communicating to the public. And again, I will do my due diligence. I am a proud graduate of AECPS. I've only ever attended schools in Anne Arundel County. And so I am all for supporting and advocating for not only the students, but for the parents of these students, and making sure that not only are we getting the most adequate education, but making sure that we have the ability to make it make sense so that everybody is getting the equal opportunity in order to voice their opinion to make school better for them.
Fantastic. Well, city residents do expect open and ethical government. And as stated in the Annapolis Ethics Guidelines, quote unquote, is holding the public trust requires maintaining high ethical standards. How are you going to promote transparency and accountability from your desk at City Hall and council chambers?
Of course, and I love that question. And I really just touched base on this question last night during the Alpha's candidate forum. And that is one of my main goals, is to be transparent while being able to hold certain people accountable. So just 3 years ago, I was not involved in any local government and any policy procedures, and I was not involved in anything that had to do with local government. And it was my ability to connect with people that are in these certain positions and have the ability to continue to grow my curious mind and ask questions so that I can then learn and reciprocate that education or that knowledge to the next person. And that's really what I want to bring to city council: accountability and transparency. I think it's important for people to understand not only who is in the position and who has the power to make certain decisions, but I think it's also important to educate people on how to advocate for themselves. Um, and again, for me being young, again, I'm only 24 years old, so this all is really new to me and my world, and I'm just building my plane as I fly it. But I think that transparency is and accountability is what's going to be able to get the most vulnerable people more involved and being able to stand up for the things that they believe in and just stand up for the things that they need to be able to sustain um in their everyday life. Transparency, accountability, and integrity are at the most forefront of not just my campaign, but who I am as a person.
Well, I'll tell you, this next topic is my favorite, number one, but I'm particularly interested in your response because you were probably 16 when this current mayor and council was elected in back in 2017. And the mayor is leaving office and the council is pretty much going to turn over. And some people have praised the administration and others have really criticized it. What do you think the administration has done right and wrong, or where did it fall short from your perspective?
Mm-hmm. So I actually love that question, and I don't typically speak on those things a lot, but I do make it very clear that I am a very opinionated person, and I do try my best to take a step back and analyze situations from the outside looking in, but then also being able to communicate with people so that I can get their perception on what happened. Um, and again, like I said, prior to 3 years ago, I was not involved in any kind of local government or anything of that nature. I was in high school and, I was doing what most high schoolers do, doing their homework, having a job, and going on about my day. But with me having the ability to work in the mayor's office as an intern, and as a community engagement specialist for a violence prevention program, uh, with this current administration, I've had the ability to really take a step back and try to figure out what's right and what's wrong. I think Gavin has done a great job with creating more unity and creating more. Um, how can I say this? He's done a good job at creating a more welcoming community. I think that his administration could have done a better job at ensuring that each community is actually getting the resources and education and funds that they need in order to sustain. And what I typically say is that Gavin opened up a lot of doors for Annapolis, but I don't think he did everything in his power to push people through that threshold in order to really optimize the opportunities that's here in Annapolis. And you can say that for anybody, really. It's really not just Gavin, but I think that there's a great amount of opportunity here in Annapolis that people just need to actually open their eyes and see the opportunities that are literally staring at them every day. So it's not really a matter of who did what wrong or who did what right. It's a matter of everybody being able to take accountability for themselves and figuring out what it is that they want for themselves and having the ability to ask those difficult questions and start those difficult conversations so that we can then put some suggestions together in order to find some feasible solutions.
Good deal. Well, budget and fiscal priorities. We often have to do more with less, with limited resources. We don't get tax revenue per se from the state, the federal government, or the county. And there's always the threat of what's happening in Washington, that we may lose some of our financial backing from Washington. As a council member, what would be your budget priorities? What are you going to argue for when budget time rolls around?
Funding grant writers. I mean, the city grant writers and analyzers. The city does a great job at giving away grant money to local organizations that are grassroots, um, that are full of grassroots leaders and opportunities. But I think that we might have fell a little short when it came to actually enforcing and making sure that these grantees are actually doing what they said they were going to do. And in my personal opinion, I believe that being able to find some funding in order to hire grant writers for multiple different departments would be a significant asset to the city, because then we will be able to go after federal money. We'll be able to go after more state funding. And again, just taking more accountability, taking more initiative, and being more proactive when it comes to issues like this. Because, like you said, we don't get a lot of tax revenue. Well, we don't get any tax revenue from the federal level, from the state level, or really even from the county level. So we need to be able to tap into this grant funding that will be an asset to the city, instead of trying to um, figure out other ways to generate income, even though that is a necessity too. We definitely need to figure out more ways to generate income on our own. But grant writers and going after grant funding will be a really big asset that I personally feel as though needs to be in addition to the city's budget.
Great. Well, voters a lot of times feel disconnected from their public representatives, and they only show up, every 4 years around election time. How do you plan to keep your community engaged in between elections?
So over my tenure in the mayor's office, I did a lot of community engagement work, whether it was at the high schools or in the community. One of the things that I noticed while I was in the mayor's office is that there aren't really a lot of day-to-day community leaders that live inside the communities. Most of these community leaders, if they do live inside the communities, they're working in another city, or, they're busy with their family. So they don't really have the ability to tend to the community as the way that we really need them to. So I think, first of all, being able to being able to implement and create advisory boards, not only for communities, but for the youth, not only for the youth, but for public safety, being able to create advisory boards that can be a starting point of a clear pipeline of communication from the city officials to these community leaders to the everyday residents, and vice versa. So I think that being able to start and create advisory boards for multiple different areas throughout the city, I think will definitely be very helpful. And I still live in the community. I honestly, I don't plan on leaving anytime soon. One, because I can't afford to, and two, because that's my home. Bywaters is my home. I've been there since I was about 2 years old, and not just Bywaters. I have family and friends that live in so many of the other underserved communities throughout Annapolis. So I will continue to do my due diligence in connecting with community leaders in specific communities to make sure that the residents are being heard, and there's a clear understanding and a clear path of communication for everybody.
Well, I'll tell you, Corinne, each of Annapolis's 8 wards has its own unique concerns and needs. In your ward, Ward 4, what do you believe is the single most pressing issue facing the community, and how do you plan to address it?
Um, In my personal opinion, I think one of the things that are most pressing to Ward 4 is an economic opportunity. If I am speaking on behalf of some of my neighbors and my residents, some other people would say that it's public safety. And I would, again, say that both of those things go hand in hand. Just like I mentioned before, I think that there's a great opportunity in being able to prevent things from happening through opportunity. So creating a sense of prevention through opportunity. So again, going back to making sure that there are summer camps during the summer, making sure that there are after school programs for students to participate in and get extra tutoring, being able to educate our students about different educational opportunities that they can seek while they're still in school, being able to connect with the reentry program through the police department, and really being able to give people the opportunities that they don't know that it's there. And even just me as of being a living example, I'm the youngest of three siblings, and I am the only entrepreneur. I'll be the only college graduate in the next year and a half. I will be the only quote unquote politician or community leader. So really just being able to tap into the things that I am now realizing that I was missing in my childhood, and being able to put those things at the forefront because I know that those basic things that everybody needs wasn't available to me, but now I have the ability to be that example and bring other people to the forefront so that they can also help me be that example. Um, Again, I think that prevention through opportunity is the way to go right now, as well as continuing to be transparent and continuing to move with integrity and being able to communicate effectively and take accountability and hold other people accountable when things are not working the way that they should.
Well, I'll tell you, we are starting to wrap up. This is my last topic that I want to talk before I turn it over to you to pitch it to all of us. But as a council member, you represent certainly your ward's interest, Ward 4, but you also must make decisions for the overall good of the city. How do you balance that, the needs of your ward, with the needs of Annapolis as a whole?
Well, I think that Ward 4 is very diverse. We have very extreme, just like Gavin has always been saying, we have extreme poverty next to extreme wealth. I mean, and just using Bywater and Kingsport for as an example. I mean, Bywater's your market rent is around $800-900, whereas Kingsport, those houses are going for $900,000 or a quarter of $1 million homes. So being able to again just meeting everybody, hearing people out, and being able to meet everybody where they are. I know that, the residents in Bywater will complain about public safety, whereas though the residents in Kingsport and near Cherry Grove will be complaining about the city's property taxes. So just being able to educate myself on the needs of each community, being able to really be able to create a clear connection with each community would definitely be efficient when speaking out for the entire Annapolis. Like you said, all of the wards have their own issues and have their own priorities and prerogatives, but at the end of the day, our city, as a city, we all need to have the ability to show up as one. And so what is not good for one person might be good for another. But if that's the case, we need to have the ability to come to the table and have a conversation about where we'll be able to make compromises and sacrifice certain things so that everybody can at least try their best to get on the same playing field so that we can then progress from there. I think that it's important to not necessarily, I think it's important to prioritize historically underserved communities for the simple fact that they are already at a disadvantage. And so just having the ability to, start those educational opportunities just so that people can be more aware and have the ability to shift their mindset when it comes to certain issues is going to be really important. And I think the best thing in the world that anybody can have is knowledge. And so again, being able to break down the barriers by explaining policy and putting policy in clear language so that somebody with a third grade educational level could understand what's going on. And I'm honored and I'm grateful that, there has been people in my corner. So there are a few folks on city council and a few individuals that represent us on a state level has had the ability to really break down certain policies and pieces of legislation so that I can understand and know what's going on, so that when I come to the table, I can have a conversation, I can give constructive feedback or put my inputs in so that my voice can be the voice for our entire city.
Fantastic. Well, I'll tell you, we have now come to the end, and now this is sort of like the closing statements in any of the forums that you've done. But as we wrap it up, we've got about 14,000 people that'll get this on their phones, and then whoever reads it on Annapolis or listens to it on Annapolis or our socials. But pitch the audience. Why do we need to vote for Coren Makell for Ward 4 Alderwoman?
Of course. Like I've said, I am a native Annapolitan. I'm born and raised here, and I plan on spending the rest of my life here outside of me traveling and seeing the rest of the world. But I really do take pride in my city and in my neighborhoods. I love Annapolis. I think Annapolis is a great place, and I honestly cannot wait to see where Annapolis has the ability to progress to within the next 8, 10, 20, 15 years. I will definitely do my due diligence in bringing a different perspective to city council. I will be the youngest city council person. And I think that this would just be a really good opportunity to shift Annapolis in a more progressive way than we have in the last 50 years. I think that having the ability to have a younger voice, a younger African-American voice at that, will definitely bring a lot of fruition to a lot of these issues that has been reoccurring over the past generations in our city. And again, I'm just ready to be the example that I wish I had growing up. I'm ready to put my foot down. I'm ready to work with the youth. I'm ready to be a connector point. I'm ready to be a bridge for all of our communities in Annapolis. And I am ready to learn. I'm ready to work. And I'm ready to get the job done.